What do you know about those people who are in that picture? Anybody? They're Amish. How do you know? How do you know they're not Mennonite? Juzel something? Man, you're really knowledgeable about these Amish. How do you know they're not early Church of the Brethren folk?
Maybe there are people dressed up in Halloween costumes and going trick-or-treating. You don't even know.
They're dressed up in Halloween costumes and going trick-or-treating, going trick-or-treating in August, because I took that picture at the campground that we camp at as they strolled through one Sunday morning, and I always try to not take their faces, and those two little girls turned around and saw my big camera lens taking their picture, and I was so embarrassed, but it was such a good picture that I have framed it and put it on my living room wall. You're right, they are Amish. And we know because of the way that they're dressed, the way that they have the hats. But Mennonites dress in similar fashion, but not always in the colors. Joy was right. The color of the men's shirts is a little different than some Mennonites, although some Mennonites would wear plain clothes. And in the early days, the Church of the Brethren, our denomination used to wear plain clothes. The men would wear a no-collared shirt, not like a priest's collar, but it would look similar to that. And they wore a black jacket that had no collars, and so it left a little opening that kind of looked like a priest's collar that they would wear. And they had no necktie, and they would have beards with no mustache, very similar to the Amish. And they did that. Why? Because of simplicity. Why else? Because they wanted to set themselves apart from the world. That's the way the world knew that they were followers of Jesus, right? It's kind of like in our day, if you are a follower of Jesus or a believer in Jesus or a Christian, maybe not a follower of Jesus, I don't know, but you might wear a t-shirt, or you might wear a bumper sticker, or you might have tattoos, or you might have a jewelry that has a cross or indicates who you are. And that's why they wore that. They wore those garbs so that they were separate from the world, so that the world would know that they were Christian, that they were followers of Jesus. And there's nothing wrong with dressing like that. But I think there's a better way to indicate that we're followers of Jesus. And we've been in this series where we're looking at the book of James, and we're about halfway through, and James has been pushing hard on some of these ways, working at that through this entire letter. And he continues working at that in this passage today. In verse 13 of chapter 3, Pastor Sharon read this. James says, "If you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it. Prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with humility that comes from wisdom." So you see, the way we live our lives is what marks us. Not what we say, especially if what we say doesn't match with how we live. And not what we believe, especially if what we believe doesn't get lived out in our lives. It's our way of life. It's the way we live. It's the way we interact with one another. And we don't need to wear different clothes to show the difference that we have by having Christ in our lives. We don't have to wear our hair a certain way. If you could see it, those gentlemen on the screen all have their hair just about shoulder length. And then if they didn't have the hat on, you would see that it looks like somebody did what my mom used to do to me and put a bow over my head and cut my bangs to fit the perimeter rim of the bowl. And that's how they wear their hair, and everyone has that. And if you would see the older gentlemen in the picture, if they're married, they would have a beard with no mustache. If they're not married, they would not have a beard, and that's how you could tell the difference. And if there were older women in this picture, you would see a difference in the prayer bonnets that they have on their head versus what the younger girls have on their head. All of that is to indicate where you are in your life with Christ and where you are in this journey. And they use these clothes to indicate that they were Christian, that they were followers of Jesus. Now, James and Jesus are more concerned not with our clothes, but with the way we live our lives. In fact, Jesus said it like this. He said that his followers would be known by the manner of their living. We would be known by the love that we share with others. And that is what James is saying here in this letter to the church as well. To live in a way that marks us as followers of Jesus is important. Throughout history, followers of Jesus have adapted various modes of dress to indicate who they are. If you were Catholic and you saw somebody walk in a habit, a woman walk in a habit, you would know that she was a nun. If you saw the little sisters of Joseph and Mary here in Salisbury, they would be in denim dresses with a white scarf on their head. That indicates the order that they are in Catholicism. If you see the priests, they have collars and coats, and the cardinals have different colored beanies. I should know the proper name. Mitre. I'm not. No, I think that's and then the Pope. And as you get higher up in the hierarchy, your dress changes to indicate so that people can see who you are in the hierarchy as they see you. And I say all that because yesterday, that Joni is struggling, and she's at Coastal Hospice, and we're in the process of cleaning out her house. And yesterday we were there, and I don't know if you knew it, but Joni was a nun at one point in her life. And we found the picture of her in her habit. And it was precious. There is a whole system of marking based on dress in the Catholic Church, in the early Church of the Brethren, in the Mennonites, in the Amish. Maybe there's even a system for us, Those systems communicated who these people were, that they were followers of Jesus, or at least claimed to be Christian. But James and Jesus argue for another way of indicating who we are as followers of Jesus. In fact, our denomination some years ago adopted a tagline called "Another Way of Living," which kind of illustrates this thing that James and Jesus are pushing. James says that evidence of connection to Jesus will be noticed in how we conduct ourselves, how we live. Living an honorable life, doing good works with humility that comes from wisdom proves that we belong to Jesus. And then James in this passage, these few short verses, contrasts the two ways. There's two kinds of wisdom, he says. There's wisdom of the world, or the way of the world. And he says the wisdom of the world is filled with jealousy and selfishness. You soon see why our world's in trouble, especially if we're all selfish. If we have blinders on and all we can see is ourselves and think about ourselves, then we're not respecting or dealing well or relating well with others in our world. He says in verse 16, he says, "For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind." That's what he's talking about in the ways of the world. And we don't have to go very far to see the ways of the world come up. And we can see it sometimes in our self as well. Then he contrasts that with 8 characteristics of wisdom from above, or wisdom from God. And he says that wisdom from God is this. Let me read the verses and then I'll highlight the 8 characteristics. He says, "But wisdom from above is first of all pure. It is also peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and good deeds. It shows no favoritism and is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. So in those couple of verses, James lists out 8 characteristics of wisdom from God. Pure, peace-loving, gentle at all times, willing to yield to others, full of mercy, full of good deeds, shows no favoritism, and always sincere or authentic. If this were a checklist, and you were comparing your life to this checklist, how many boxes would you check off? Thank you for your honesty. You didn't even know I was going to ask that. But just think about it again in relation to your life. I don't want to hear your answers. And I definitely don't want to hear it if you got 8. Because nobody here has 8. Nobody. We're all work in progress. So here are, just check off in your mind if you exhibit some of these characteristics of wisdom from above. You're pure, peace-loving, gentle at all times, willing to yield to others, full of mercy, full of good deeds, shows no favoritism, always sincere or authentic. To do that little exercise and check off in relationship to our lives is a great analysis to do. Because how we live matters, and it matters a whole lot. And anyone can wear a label, but labels don't tell you the whole story. I mean, I could go around, I have marked my arms with Christian sayings. This says, I am but a servant, and has a Christian cross. And this one says, receive love, give love, become love. And I could wear those. I am going to wear them for the rest of my life because it's a tattoo and you can't take it off. So it marks me. But if I didn't live my life in a way that's consistent, congruent with these markings, it's just a label. It's nothing. I put them on there because I want to say to myself, I want to remind myself, that's who I want to be. I want to be able to check off some of these boxes. I don't want to live a selfish life. I don't want to live a life that's jealous and constantly competing with other people. See, labels don't tell the whole story. It's our action that does. It's not a problem that we don't have all the boxes checked. In fact, it's a problem if you do. Because we aren't perfect. And we all are a work in progress. And so what do we do if we can't check all these boxes and we think we should be working toward that? How do we do that? Well, James began in the very first part of his letter in chapter 1, verse 5. He says, if you need wisdom, ask your generous God, and he will give it to you. So if you need wisdom, if you're lacking in some of those 8 check boxes, ask God to help you. And he will. I promise. So if you aren't gentle at all times, ask God to soften your heart. It won't happen overnight. And it won't happen all the time. There will be moments where you fail. Like this morning, and I publicly tried to apologize to Kelly, and I want to publicly apologize. I said something, sure, I wasn't very gentle when I was struggling to hear Joy's voice out of that. And so I stepped up here when I thought the song was over. I didn't realize I was stepping up in the middle of the song and said something with a tone in my voice that was frustrated, that wasn't gentle. And so I apologize. I'm sorry for that tone that I used. I believe that when you do something wrong to someone, you ought to apologize in the manner. So since I did it in front of the congregation, I feel like I needed to say that in front of the congregation. That's a struggle sometimes for me. Maybe it's a struggle for you. If you aren't able to yield to others, ask God to help you. That's one of the biggest ones I have here. I struggle to yield to others. You know that. You've seen that. At least I struggle in this way, and that is to allow others to help me. That's the biggest struggle I have. And I heard some of you talking about that this week as you've seen me at the shelter. I don't know. Every night I was there, probably. But it was particularly bad. I don't know. Was it Friday night or Thursday? What night was it, CJ? That you and Kathy were all prepared to take over or to be there, and people were coming at me. I think it was Friday night. I think it was the night that Walt wasn't there, not this Walt, but the other Walt. And I needed to felt like I needed to go see Joni and take care of things there. I've been trying to see her about 3 times a day just to check in and make sure everything's okay. I'm her power of attorney. She has no family, and and she's a difficult patient, and so I just have been trying to mitigate things and be on top of that. And they were there and could handle it all. And before I could get out of there, I had half a dozen people come to me and need this or that. And instead of saying, oh, well, why don't you go see the front desk people? They're here to help. I just went ahead and did all those things because they came to me. See, I struggle with allowing others to help me. I struggle with yielding to others. And so then, and we talked about this. I didn't even know Stacy was coming today. We talked about this in the first service. Stacy always had a phrase that really applies, and it has been very helpful and always stuck with me. Can you remember it, Stacy? Don't steal my joy. Yeah. I think that began with you. Okay. So it was it's a great phrase when you're in this situation, because what I did was steal the joy that CJ and Kathy could have gotten from helping those people when I wouldn't allow that to happen. Stacy used to say to me all the time, that's why I know she did it, because she'd say, don't steal my joy. Don't steal my joy. And so that's, for me, that's a helpful reminder, helpful phrase to kind of get me back in line where I need to be in relation to yielding to others. But, if we can't yield to others, or be full of mercy, or full of good deeds, or show no favoritism, or always be sincere, or gentle at all times, or peace-loving, or pure, simply pause and ask God. And every time you find that you're not, keep asking God to give you that part of wisdom that comes from above, so that we can live another way, so that we can live not as selfish people like the world, not as people who are always competing and jealous and trying to get ahead, but as people who care about one another and want all of us to arrive and have rewards and joy in our lives. I'm grateful for those of you in this congregation who keep pushing me in that area where I struggle. I'm grateful yesterday we had Ed and Jean and my friend Sarah Lee. Many of you have offered. Those were the 3 that I invited to join us at Joni's. She's never going to go back to her home. She rents the home. It's the 1st of March. It has a lot of stuff in it, and I feel a burden to get all that stuff out. I don't feel like I can just say to the landlord, here's the keys. I mean, I could. And if he had gotten out of line, I might have, but he stopped by yesterday, as I knew he would when the word got to him that we were there. He was grateful that we were cleaning out. I took 2 of my truckloads to the dump yesterday, probably 75 bags of stuff. Not sellable, usable stuff, but stuff. For those of you who have been in the house before, it's all back. We cleaned it out 6-8 years ago, and it was, it's there. And so I'm grateful that they came and helped and pushed, because when we first started, Sharon and I went Thursday night just to kind of get a lay of the land and try to wrap my mind around how we were going to get that task done. And we took out about 13 bags that night. And then we had a system. And when I said to a couple of Ed and Jean and Sarah Lee that we were going to go, they said, well, we'd like to go too. And I said to Sharon, I don't know if I want. And Sharon said, yes, you need to you need to invite these people. And I'm glad I did, because we got a lot more done than Sharon and I would have gotten done. I mean, when Ed and Jean walked into the house, they were like, well, this isn't as bad as you told us it was. And it wasn't, because we had taken 13 bags and 10 cases of disposable bed pads that were brand new. that she used for underneath her bird cages. I took them to the Humane Society because I didn't know where else to take them. Now I have about 20 cases of Depends diapers. Cases. Okay. I'm happy to find a home for them. They'll fill one of your rooms. But anyhow, happy to find a place to have that kind of stuff and happy to have the help to work at it. Wisdom from above looks different from earthly wisdom, and it marks us in huge ways as followers of Jesus. So my question for you this morning is this: what area do you need to work on? I've already named two of mine. And as you identify that area, I encourage you to ask God for help in working on that area. You see, Jesus, and the reason this matters is Jesus left his mission in our hands. And he expected and expects us to carry on his mission. And you don't have to look very far in our world to realize that it is desperate for more Jesus. Now, I'm not talking about it's desperate for more people coming up and smacking you upside the head with a Bible. It's not desperate for more people who are pushy or are being mean. It doesn't need a mean Jesus, doesn't need a pushy Jesus, doesn't even need a judgmental Jesus, because Jesus wasn't those things. What this world needs is a Jesus that is pure, that is loving, that is gentle at all times, that is willing to yield to others, that is full of mercy, full of good deeds, shows no favoritism, and is always sincere. And it needs us. Jesus lives in us and through us in the world. That's how he designed it. That's how it's meant to be. And when we embrace this heavenly wisdom, this wisdom from above, when we become more like Jesus, it makes a difference in our world. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But before we do, I want to make a connection that I made a little bit as I was studying this on the go this week, really, honestly, this morning, because this week has been so filled with no time for anything, because of all that I've been doing at the shelter and taking care of Joni and all of that, and the other things that I've done this week. What I was thinking about as James ends this passage in verse 18, he says, "And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness." And I was thinking, he's saying that all of these characteristics lead to something. And they make us peacemakers. And I was thinking about Jesus in the Beatitudes has one beatitude where he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they are children of God." And so I was thinking, I went this morning to look at that. And then as I read in Matthew 5, verses 3 and following, the 8 Beatitudes, I was struck by the fact, I knew that there were 8, but I was struck by the fact that many of them kind of go along with these 8 characteristics of wisdom from above. Listen, and you can pick the ones out that kind of line up. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will receive mercy. There's at least one. God blesses those whose hearts are pure. There's a second, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called children of God. There's a third. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. There might be a fourth. And there might be another one that you would say, the humble, you might say that a couple of them kind of mirror what James is saying. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? And to be a peacemaker is not simply to be against war. Though I'm just going to say this, and I might offend some of you, I think we need to think about taking life. All of life. If we're a follower of Jesus, life is sacred. It's important. And I think we need to think about that. But the point I really wanted to make is that peacemaking is another way of living. And this picture that I had on the screen earlier, I think illustrates another way of living and a way of modern day peacemaking and living this wisdom from above. So that picture is downtown Salisbury. That is Old Town Deli and owner in the black holding the container of sandwiches. And so since late October, early November, the street in front of Old Town Deli has been closed due to construction. And every other day they dig it up and they put the dirt back. They dig it up and they put the dirt back. And they've been doing this process of redoing all the piping and infrastructure underneath the street. The sewage pipes were 100 years old and in some places were wooden. Can you imagine? I don't even want to get in that soil. That dirt, it's dirt. It's not soil. And so business has been down because one day you go out and they not only have the sidewalk closed, but they have a big hole that even if you wanted to go by the barrier to go past, you can't because there's a hole. There's a trench dug right up to a building, or they have it fenced off. You see the orange fence behind these guys. They're on the inside of the fence, but it changes from one day to the other. And some people are just saying, bag it. I'm not going to go there. It's easier to get in my car and go somewhere else. So they don't come for lunch, or they don't come for breakfast, or they don't come for coffee. And business was hurting. And Vicente is a young guy. He just took over the business in August, and he doesn't have a bank account to float him, when it gets tough. And so I've been really concerned about him. And I've been really pleased to watch what he did. Instead of grumbling and complaining, these guys, I wish they would get it done. I wish they would finish this street. They've really wrecked my business. And he didn't do any of that. See, that's wisdom from the world. Wisdom from above says, live another way. And so the other way he lived, a couple Fridays ago, he decided that he was going to offer a special. Everybody who came in and bought a breakfast sandwich, he would donate a breakfast sandwich to the men on the street, to the workers. Because the other thing that got him interested in doing this wasn't just the business angle. It was also that these guys who he had become friends with were starting to tell him that people were giving him the finger. People were cussing them out. People were looking dirty at them because they were there doing their jobs to fix our streets and make our street more beautiful. And Vicente said, that can't be the way they know Salisbury. Most of these guys are from Dover because that's where the company that they come from works. And he said, that can't be the representation that we give them. We got to do something. So I'll do this breakfast sandwich, buy one, give one. And he did. And that Friday he had enough for the next week to give every day the next week to the 17 construction workers that were there. And if that was all that happened, that's beautiful in and of itself. And that's peacemaking at its best. And that's living another way. And that's applying the wisdom from above in our lives. And yet it didn't stop there. After that 5-day period was over, a business came in and said, I'm going to buy a breakfast sandwich for all 17 of the construction workers, and I'm going to buy lunch for a local business, and I'm going to challenge them to buy a breakfast sandwich for the 17 workers and buy lunch for another local business. And now as of Friday, I think it's cycled 5 times. That means 5 businesses have bought breakfast sandwiches for the guys. And it's gotten so wonderful that the guys are wanting to give back. In fact, the other day, I think they came in and threw $100 bill on the table and said, "This is for breakfast sandwiches for I don't know who they bought for, And it's just beautiful to see. And then on this Friday, we had another business come in and gave him $100 and said, for the first 10 people that come through the door today at lunchtime, we want to buy their lunch. Just as a way of being kind. Beyond the businesses, challenging businesses. And you see when that ripples, you see the impact that one decision to honor God by, instead of grumbling about these construction workers, by blessing them? You see what happened? Think about the condition of our world. Think about how different it would be if we, the followers of Jesus, instead of wearing our labels, lived our faith. If we became pure and gentle and let me get this list because I don't have it memorized. Pure and peace-loving and gentle at all times. If we became willing to yield to others, if we became full of mercy, full of good deeds, showing no favoritism and always sincere, authentic. Imagine how different our world would be. What's stopping us? Well, we embrace the wisdom of the world too much. We put on our blinders and we think about ourselves way more than we think about others. I pray to God that that would change in all of our lives and that this ripple would begin to go throughout the whole world, the ripple of Jesus, the ripple of his love. He talked about it in Acts 1:8. He said, "You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Samaria, or in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." That's the ripple. And that's the call that we have in our lives, wherever we find ourselves, to apply this wisdom from above into our lives and allow our lives to show the world Jesus, pure and simple. May it be so.